Mourning Ambassador Kethvar received the message. 3 suns hung low over the crystalline spires of the Galactic Council headquarters on Centauri Prime. The Velnari diplomat had served the Council for 47 standard years, witnessing the rise and fall of countless civilizations. But nothing had prepared him for the simple, devastating communication that appeared on his quantum display. The Terran Federation formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. All human personnel will be recalled within 7 standard days. We thank the Council for the opportunity to participate in galactic governance and wish all member species prosperity in their future endeavors. That was it. No explanation, no demands, no triats. Just a polite withdrawal notice that sent ice through Kethvar's 4-chambered heart. The humans had been Council members for only 32 standard years, a blink of an eye in galactic politics. Yet their impact had been extraordinary. They approached problems differently than any of the other 14 member species. Where the ancient Zephyrians would debate philosophical implications for decades, humans acted. Where the methodical Corvin would spend years analyzing data, humans found patterns and solutions with disturbing speed. Kethvar's elongated fingers trembled as he activated the emergency session protocol. Within hours, representatives from across known space would converge on Centauri Prime, but he already knew what they would find: empty human quarters, abandoned research projects, and the lingering question of why. The first to arrive was High Counselor Thane of the Corvin hierarchy, his massive insectoid frame clicking across the polished floors of the council chambers. The Corvin were natural administrators, their hive mind structure making them ideal for bureaucratic work, but even Thane seemed agitated, his antennae twitching with nervous energy. "Have you reviewed the withdrawal protocols?" Thane's voice resonated through his thoracic chambers, creating the harmonic undertones that made Corvin's speech so distinctive. "There are no withdrawal protocols," Kethvar replied, his translator implant converting his natural whistle song in a standard galactic. "The Council Charter assumes membership is permanent. We never consider that a species would voluntarily leave." Counselor Shekura of the Hegemony of Worlds materialized in a shimmer of displaced air, her teleportation arrival stirring the environmental controls. The Shek were energy beings who maintained physical form only through advanced technology, and Shekura's current appearance, a tall, graceful humanoid wreathed in shifting aurora, reflected her current emotional state, confused and concerned. "The human quarters are empty," she reported without preamble. "Not just vacant, completely stripped. They removed everything down to the decorative plants in their embassy gardens. It's as if they were never here." More representatives arrived throughout the day. Elder Voss of the Meridian Union, whose aquatic species rarely left their water worlds except for the most crucial matters. Prime Administrator Gell of the Techno Collective, his cybernetic implants whirring with computational activity. Even the reclusive Whispers sent a delegate, though their representative remained invisible and communicated only through gravitational fluctuations that required specialized equipment to interpret. As the emergency session convened in the great crystalline amphitheater, Kethvar found himself staring at the empty human section. Their seats, designed for bipedal mammals with their strange flexibility and compact frame, looked oddly forlorn among the varied accommodations for the other species. "We must understand why they left," declared Prime Administrator Gell, his mechanical voice cutting through the chamber's acoustics. "Humans were useful to the Council. Their unconventional thinking patterns provided solutions to problems that had stagnated for millennia." "Useful," scoffed Elder Voss, her translation implant rendering her complex bioluminescent patterns into audible speech. "They were reckless, always pushing boundaries, always questioning established protocols. Perhaps their departure is a blessing." Shakira's form flickered with what her species considered amusement. "Easy to say now, Voss, but who solved the Kargal trade dispute? Who developed the containment protocols for the Void Plague? Who negotiated the peace treaty with the Savage Rings?" The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the answer. It had been humanity's representative, Ambassador Sarah Chun, working with a small team of human specialists. In 32 years, humans had resolved more galactic crises than some species had addressed in millennia. They had a gift for seeing connections that others missed, for finding solutions that seemed obvious only in hindsight. We should examine their recent communications, suggested High Counselor Thane. Perhaps there were warning signs we missed. The next several hours were spent reviewing months of human diplomatic traffic. What they found was disturbing in its normalcy. Right up until the withdrawal notice, human representatives had been actively participating in council business. Ambassador Chun had submitted a proposal for improved trade standardization just days before the announcement. Dr. James Morrison had been collaborating with Corvin researchers on a terraforming project scheduled to begin next month. Commander Lisa Park had been working with the Defense Subcommittee on patrol schedules for the Outer Rim territories. "It makes no sense," muttered Counselor Yeth of the Spiral Dominion, his crystalline body refracting the chamber's lights into prismatic patterns. They were engaged, productive, cooperative. Why leave? As if in answer to his question, a priority communication signal began broadcasting throughout the chamber. The source identifier showed it was coming from human space, specifically from Earth itself. The assembled representatives watched in fascination as a three-dimensional projection materialized in the center of the chamber. It showed a woman in her middle years, wearing the simple blue and silver uniform of the Terran Federation. Her hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her eyes held a mixture of weariness and determination that even alien psychologists had learned to recognize as distinctly human. "Greetings, esteemed members of the Galactic Council," the human said, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's translation systems. "I am President Elena Rodriguez of the Terran Federation. I suspect you have questions about our withdrawal, and you deserve answers." The president paused, seeming to gather her thoughts, though Kethvar suspected this was a carefully rehearsed presentation. "For 32 years, humanity has been proud to serve alongside you in the cause of galactic peace and prosperity. We have shared our knowledge, our resources, and our people in service to the greater good. We believed, as I suspect many of you still believe, that cooperation and collaboration are the keys to a better future for all sentient life." Another pause, and when she continued, her tone had shifted subtly. "Recent events have forced us to reconsider this position. 3 months ago, our intelligence services discovered a conspiracy within the Council that targets humanity specifically. We have evidence of systematic sabotage of human-led initiatives, deliberate suppression of human technological contributions, and active planning for what some species consider the human problem." The chamber erupted in protests and denials, but the projection continued speaking. "We know about the Corvin analysis recommending human quarantine. We know about the Meridian proposal to limit human expansion. We know about the secret sessions where our elimination was discussed as a viable solution to what you perceive as our disruptive influence." Kethvar felt his breathing apparatus seize. He looked around the chamber, noting which representatives seemed genuinely shocked and which appeared merely caught. The divide was troubling. "We also know," President Rodriguez continued, "that not all of you participated in or supported these discussions. There are species in this chamber who stood up for humanity, who argued for our continued inclusion, who saw value in our different approach to problem solving. To those species, we offer our gratitude and our friendship." The president's image straightened, and her voice took on a formal quality. "However, we cannot continue to participate in an organization where our existence is seen as a threat to be managed rather than a perspective to be valued. Therefore, humanity withdraws not just from the Council, but from this entire region of space. We will be relocating beyond the galactic rim, seeking new frontiers where we can develop without concern for disturbing established power structures." The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Humanity wasn't just leaving the Council. They were leaving known space entirely. "We will honor all existing trade agreements and treaties for 1 standard year, allowing for orderly transitions. After that, humanity will have no formal relationships with Council species. This is not a threat or an ultimatum, simply a statement of intent. The projection flickered, and for a moment President Rodriguez's formal composure cracked, revealing something almost like regret. We had hoped for better. We believed that intelligence and goodwill could overcome the fear and territorialism that has dominated galactic politics for millennia. Perhaps we were naive. Perhaps cooperation between species so fundamentally different is impossible. We leave that determination to you. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. It was Elder Voss who spoke first, her bioluminescent patterns dim with what her species considered deep thought. They know about the Meridian Accords. That's impossible, Shakira protested, though her energy form flickered uncertainly. Those sessions were closed to all non-aquatic species. Clearly not closed enough, High Counselor Thane observed. His antennae drooped in what Corvin considered shame. The human intelligence capabilities were always underestimated. Kethvar found his voice with difficulty. How much do they know? About the Directive 7 protocols? About the planetary limitation treaties? The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. Prime Administrator Gell's mechanical systems whirred as he processed the implications. We must examine the economic impact of human withdrawal. Their trade networks support 17% of galactic commerce. Their technological contributions account for 33% of recent patent filings. Their resource extraction operations supply critical materials to 47 worlds. And their military contributions added Commander Tycho of the Hegemony Defense Force, speaking for the first time since arriving. Human tactics and strategies have been integral to our peacekeeping operations. Their ship designs, their training methods, their combat philosophy, we've incorporated all of it into our standard procedures. Counselor Yetha's crystalline form darkened. Perhaps we should have considered these factors before allowing the inner circle to pursue their agenda. The phrase hung in the air like an accusation. The inner circle, the informal group of the oldest and most established council species who made the real decisions behind closed doors. Kethvar had always known of their existence, though as a representative of a younger species, he had never been invited to participate. The inner circle acted in the best interests of galactic stability, Elder Voss declared, though her pattern suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Human expansion was becoming problematic. Their reproduction rates, their territorial ambitions, their disregard for established boundaries. Something had to be done. Had to be done? Shakira's form flared with indignation. They were the most valuable members we've ever had. They solved the Cygnus conflict in 6 months, a dispute that had raged for 2 centuries. They developed the quantum communication network that allows us to coordinate across galactic distances. They created the anti-plague vaccines that saved billions of lives during the rot epidemic. And they did all of it while expanding into 27 new star systems, Voss countered, while establishing colonies at a rate that alarmed every major power, while developing military technologies that made their fleets more powerful than anything we'd seen since the Founder Wars. The argument continued, but Kethvar found himself thinking about something else entirely. In 32 years of human membership, he couldn't recall a single instance of humanity using their growing power aggressively. They had intervened in conflicts, yes, but always as peacekeepers or mediators. They had developed advanced weapons, certainly, but they had also shared the technology freely with Council forces. It occurred to him that perhaps the Inner Circle's fears said more about their own nature than about humanity's intentions. His contemplation was interrupted by an urgent communication from his aide. The message was brief, but alarming. Human ships were moving throughout known space, but not in the random patterns of evacuation. They were moving with purpose, following specific routes, gathering at predetermined coordinates. Honored colleagues, Kethvar announced, his voice cutting through the continuing argument. We have a more immediate problem. Human fleet movements suggest they are not simply withdrawing. They're conducting a planned operation. The Chamber's attention focused on him as he shared the incoming intelligence reports. Human ships were appearing at strategic locations throughout the galaxy. Major trade hubs, communication relay stations, resource extraction facilities, research installations. But they weren't attacking or occupying these locations. They were simply present. What are they doing? Prime Administrator Gell wondered aloud, his computational systems struggling to identify a pattern. The answer came in the form of another transmission, this time from Ambassador Sarah Chun, broadcasting from what appeared to be the bridge of a human starship. Unlike President Rodriguez's formal address, Chin's message was personal, almost conversational. "Hello, my friends," she said, and, despite everything, Kethvar felt a pang of loss at her familiar greeting. In 32 years, Chun had never begun a communication any other way. "I wanted to speak with you one last time before we close this chapter of human history." Chun moved closer to the camera, her expression serious but not hostile. "By now you've noticed our ships throughout Council space. We're not here to threaten or retaliate. We're here to clean up. Over 3 decades, humanity has contributed significantly to galactic infrastructure. We've built communication arrays, established research stations, developed trade networks, created defense installations. Much of this was done in partnership with Council species, but the core technologies, the fundamental innovations, those are ours. The implications struck the assembled representatives like a cascading system failure. We won't leave our technology in the hands of those who sought to eliminate us," Chun continued. "Over the next standard day, we will be dismantling or deactivating all human-developed systems. The quantum communication network will be shut down. The defense platforms we design will be powered down. The research stations we built will be evacuated." "This can't be happening," whispered Shekura, her energy form flickering with distress. "Trade agreements will be honored until their expiration dates, but we will not be renewing any contracts. Research partnerships are terminated immediately. All human personnel are being recalled. When we leave, we will take our contributions with us." Chun paused, and for a moment her professional composure slipped. "You know, the saddest part of all this is that it was unnecessary. We never wanted to dominate galactic politics. We wanted to participate in them. We never sought to replace existing power structures. We hoped to improve them. We came to the stars looking for friends and partners, not subjects or territories." Her image steadied, and when she continued, her voice carried the weight of finality. "But if you see us as a threat to be contained rather than an ally to be embraced, then perhaps it's better for everyone if we find our own path. The galaxy is vast, and there's room for us somewhere beyond your borders." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in chaos. Representatives were shouting at each other, demanding explanations, assigning blame. But Kethvar barely heard them. His attention was focused on the cascade of system failures beginning to appear on his displays. The quantum communication network was indeed shutting down. Real-time communication across galactic distances, something the Council had taken for granted for decades, was becoming impossible. Trade coordination was collapsing as automated systems went offline. Defense platforms protecting 17 major worlds were powering down. In the space of a single day, 3 decades of progress was being undone. "We have to stop them," declared Commander Tycho, his military bearing evident even through his environmental suit. "Deploy the defense force. Prevent them from damaging critical infrastructure." "With what?" Gell's mechanical voice carried a note of hysteria that should have been impossible for his species. 60% of our fleet designs incorporate human innovations. Our navigation systems use their stellar mapping data. Our weapons targeting relies on their computational algorithms. Half our ships won't function properly without their technology." The magnitude of human integration into galactic civilization was becoming clear, and it was staggering. For 32 years, humanity had been quietly becoming essential to the basic functioning of known space. They planned this, Elder Voss realized, her patterns dim with what might have been respect or fear. This withdrawal is not an emotional response to the inner circle's actions. This is a calculated operation that took years to prepare. High Counselor Thane's antennae drooped further. We underestimated them. Again, as if to emphasize the point, another wave of system failures swept through the chamber. The environmental controls flickered as human-designed efficiency improvements went offline. The translation matrix struggled as human linguistic contributions were removed from its databases. Even the chamber's lighting dimmed as power distribution systems reverted to older, less effective configurations. Kethvar watched his colleagues panic and blame each other, and he realized that humanity had just taught the galaxy a lesson that would echo through history. It was easier to build cooperation than to survive without it. But by then, it was too late to learn. The first week after humanity's withdrawal was chaos. The second week was catastrophe. By the third week, Ambassador Kethvar wondered if galactic civilization would survive at all. He stood in what had once been the galaxy's most advanced command center, watching technicians from a dozen species struggle to maintain systems that had been elegant and efficient just days before. The quantum communication array that had connected thousands of worlds now functioned at perhaps 20% capacity, forcing a return to slower-than-light message drones for anything beyond local space. Status report, Kethvar requested, though he dreaded the answer. Chief Technician Yerval of the Techno Collective looked up from a bank of flickering displays, her cybernetic implants working overtime to process the cascading failures. We've restored basic communication to the core worlds, but anything beyond the middle rim is still dark. The trade networks are collapsing faster than we can establish backup protocols. And the defense grid. She gestured helplessly at a tactical display that showed vast gaps where human-designed platforms had once maintained security. 17 sectors are completely unprotected. The automated patrol systems have shut down. 3 freight convoys have already been attacked by pirates who somehow knew exactly when and where our coverage would fail. Kethvar's breathing apparatus contracted with stress. It wasn't just the immediate problems. It was the growing realization of how dependent they had become on human innovations. Every major system in galactic civilization had been touched, improved, or completely redesigned by human engineers over the past 3 decades. Sir, another technician called out, his corvan antennae twitching with agitation. We're receiving a distress signal from the Meridian Research Station. They're reporting catastrophic failure of their life support systems. The irony was bitter. The Meridian Research Station was one of the facilities where Elder Voss's people had conducted their secret analyses of the human problem. Now, they were dying because the humans had taken their life support improvements with them. Dispatch emergency aid, Kethvar ordered, though he knew it would take days for help to arrive without the human-designed rapid response protocols. The crisis deepened hour by hour. On Corvin Prime, manufacturing systems ground to a halt as human-developed automation protocols were removed. The Zephyrian philosophy worlds found themselves isolated as the translation matrices that had allowed their complex thought patterns to be understood by other species reverted to crude approximations. Even the Whispers, with their gravitational communication, discovered that the human-designed amplification networks had been quietly boosting their signals across the galaxy. But it was the economic collapse that truly demonstrated humanity's integration into galactic society. The humans hadn't just participated in trade, they had revolutionized it. Their logistics algorithms had optimized shipping routes across thousands of light years. Their risk assessment protocols had enabled financial instruments that supported colonial expansion throughout known space. Their market analysis systems had prevented economic disasters and identified opportunities that had lifted dozens of species out of poverty. Without warning, 3 decades of economic growth evaporated. How do we not see this? Prime Administrator Gell demanded during an emergency session of what remained of the Galactic Council. His mechanical systems were operating at reduced efficiency as human-designed improvements to his cybernetic implants went offline. How did we become so dependent without realizing it? High Counselor Thane consulted data streams that flickered with instability. Analysis suggests a pattern of gradual integration over the entire period of human membership. Each innovation was presented as an improvement to existing systems rather than a replacement. We accepted the upgrades because they worked better than what we had. They made themselves indispensable, Shekera observed. Her energy formed dim with exhaustion from trying to maintain failing power grids across multiple worlds. Not through force or coercion, but by being genuinely useful. Elder Voss remained silent during most discussions, her bioluminescent pattern subdued. When she finally spoke, her words carried the weight of species-wide regret. The Meridian Accords assumed that humanity's contributions could be easily replaced or replicated. Our analysis suggested that their technologies were advanced, but not fundamentally beyond our capabilities. We believed we could achieve the same results given sufficient time and resources. She paused, her patterns dimming further. We were wrong. It wasn't just their technology, it was their approach to problems. They saw connections we missed, considered variables we ignored, accepted risks we wouldn't take. They didn't just build better systems, they thought about systems differently. The admission hung in the air like a confession. For the first time in galactic history, an advanced species was acknowledging that they had encountered minds that worked better than their own in certain ways. So what do we do? Counselor Yeth asked, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's emergency lighting into fractured rainbows. Do we attempt to contact them? Negotiate their return? With what? Commander Tykel interjected bitterly. Our long-range communication is crippled. Our ships can barely navigate without their stellar cartography updates. Half our fleet is grounded because we can't replicate their engine innovations. The military situation was perhaps the most alarming aspect of humanity's withdrawal. For 32 years, human tactical doctrine had become integrated into Council defense strategy. Their ship designs had proven superior in combat. Their training methods had improved the effectiveness of multi-species crews. Their intelligence-gathering techniques had provided early warning of threats for beyond known space. All that was gone. We need to understand where they went, Gell insisted. Human ships were detected moving toward the galactic rim, but then they simply vanished. Our long-range sensors can't track them beyond the void reaches. The void reaches, the vast empty space between their galaxy and the nearest neighboring star systems. No Council species had ever seriously considered venturing into that darkness. It would take decades of travel, even with the fastest ships, and the isolation would be absolute. Why would they go there? Yeth wondered. There's nothing in the void. No resources, no habitable worlds, no strategic value. Kethvar had been thinking about this question for days, and he was beginning to suspect the answer was precisely that. Nothing. No existing claims, no established territories, no ancient boundaries drawn by species that had been traveling the stars since before humans had discovered fire. In the void, humanity could build whatever they wanted without worrying about disturbing established power structures. It was, he realized, a very human solution to a political problem. His contemplation was interrupted by an urgent alert from the chamber's failing communication system. A message was incoming from the Outer Rim territories, specifically from Mining Station 7, one of the most remote human installations in known space. The transmission quality was poor, full of static and interference that made the speaker difficult to identify. But the message itself was clear enough to send eyes through every representative present. This is Chief Engineer Martinez at Mining Station 7. If anyone is receiving this, we are under attack. Unknown vessels, configuration unlike anything in our databases. They appeared out of nowhere and began firing immediately. Our defenses are holding for now, but wait, there are more of them. Dozens more. They're not Council species. They're not human either. There's something else entirely, and they seem very interested in our mining operations. The transmission cut to static, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Unknown vessels, Shekera whispered, her form flickering with what her species considered terror. Attacking a human installation. But the humans are supposed to be withdrawing, Thane protested. Why would anyone attack an abandoned facility? Kethvar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's failing environmental controls. What if it's not abandoned? What if some humans stay behind? The possibility that some humans had not participated in the withdrawal opened up disturbing new questions. Were they colonists who couldn't or wouldn't leave? Military personnel assigned to guard critical facilities? Or something else entirely? Before anyone could respond, another transmission broke through the static. This time the voice was clearly human, though the speaker remained unidentified. This is Captain Sarah Mitchell of the Terran Defense Force. We have received your distress call, Mining Station 7. Relief forces are en route. Estimated arrival in 4 hours. The implications struck the chamber like a physical blow. Terran Defense Force, not Federation, but something new. And they were responding to threats in what should have been abandoned human space. They didn't all leave, Gell realized, his mechanical voice unusually quiet. Some of them stayed behind. More transmissions followed over the next few hours, painting a picture that none of the Council representatives had anticipated. Human military forces were engaging unknown attackers across multiple systems. But these weren't Federation ships or Federation protocols. This was something new, something organized, something that had been planned. Emergency session of the Defense Committee, Commander Tycho announced, his military bearing asserting itself despite the chaos. We need to understand what we're dealing with. The next 12 hours brought a steady stream of disturbing intelligence. The unknown attackers were not random pirates or raiders. They moved with coordination and purpose, targeting specific human installations with remarkable precision. Their technology was advanced, but unfamiliar, suggesting origins from outside known space. Most troubling of all, they seemed to know exactly which human facilities to attack and want to find them most vulnerable. Someone provided them with intelligence. Tycho concluded during the Defense Committee briefing. Detailed information about human installations, schedules, defensive capabilities. This wasn't a random encounter. It was a coordinated assault. The accusation hung in the air unspoken, but obvious. Who else but Council species would have such detailed information about human operations? You're suggesting that someone in the Council provided targeting data to hostile aliens? Elder Voss's patterns flared with indignation. That's a serious charge. It's the only explanation that fits the data, Tycho replied grimly. Unless you believe in an extraordinary series of coincidences. Before the argument could escalate, a new transmission broke through their debate. This time it was a clear, strong signal that somehow bypassed their crippled communication systems entirely. The speaker was a human male in military uniform, standing on what appeared to be the bridge of a warship. Behind him, displays showed tactical information and star charts that included regions beyond the galactic rim. This is Admiral James Harrison of the Terran Expeditionary Force, he announced, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. I'm transmitting on all frequencies to ensure this message reaches the Galactic Council. The chamber fell silent, every representative focused on the unexpected communication. 26 hours ago, installations throughout what you consider human space came under attack by an alien force of unknown origin. These attackers demonstrated detailed knowledge of our defensive capabilities and operational schedules. They struck with precision that could only come from inside intelligence. Harrison's expression hardened. We have successfully repelled these attacks and taken prisoners. Under interrogation, they revealed that they were hired by representatives of the Galactic Council to eliminate what they termed remaining human assets in preparation for territorial annexation. The chamber erupted in protests and denials, but the transmission continued. The Terran Federation may have withdrawn from Council space, but we have not abandoned our people. Any further attacks on human installations will be considered acts of war against the Terran Expeditionary Force. Harrison leaned forward, and his next words carried a chill that transcended species barriers. You wanted the humans gone. Congratulations, you got your wish. But we're taking our territory with us. All systems with significant human populations or infrastructure are hereby claimed as sovereign Terran space. Any attempt to occupy or exploit these systems will be met with force. The transmission ended, leaving the Council in chaos once again. But this time, the chaos carried an undercurrent of fear that was entirely new. Humanity hadn't just withdrawn from galactic politics. They had become an independent power. And, based on the technology demonstrated in their recent military actions, they had become a very formidable independent power. How many systems are we talking about? Kethvar asked, though he suspected the answer would be devastating. Gel's computational systems worked furiously, correlating data from thousands of sources. When he finally responded, his mechanical voice carried a note of something that might have been awe. 437 systems with significant human presence, including 17 of the most resource-rich sectors in known space. If humanity successfully claims and holds these territories, they will control approximately 38% of galactic industrial capacity. The numbers were staggering. In 32 years, humanity had quietly established a presence throughout known space that rivaled the combined holdings of the oldest council species. They weren't just participating in our civilization, Shakira realized, her energy form flickering with new understanding. They were building their own. And now, as the galaxy struggled with the collapse of systems they hadn't realized they depended on, humanity was revealing the true scope of their preparations for independence. The humans hadn't just left. They had taken half the galaxy with them 6 months after humanity's withdrawal. Ambassador Kethvar stood in the ruins of what had once been the galaxy's most prosperous trade hub. Nexus Station, orbiting the binary stars of the Kepler system, had been a marvel of engineering that processed 60% of all interspecies commerce. Now, it was a hollow shell, its corridors dark, and its docking bays empty. The economic collapse had been swift and merciless. Without human logistics systems, shipping costs had increased by 400%. Without human risk assessment algorithms, insurance rates had skyrocketed beyond the reach of most traders. Without human market analysis, investment had ground to a halt as no one could predict which ventures would succeed. But it was the discovery of the dead zones that had truly shaken galactic civilization to its core. "Show me the map again," Kethvar requested, though he had memorized every detail over the past month. His aide, a young Velnari named Sothal, activated the holographic display with obvious reluctance. The three-dimensional representation of known space appeared between them, but it no longer resembled the neat, orderly territories that had defined galactic politics for millennia. Instead, vast sectors showed in stark red, the dead zones where human infrastructure had been so integral to basic survival that their withdrawal meant immediate evacuation or death. 47 star systems had been completely abandoned. Over 300 more were operating on minimal life support, their populations desperately seeking relocation to safer regions. The Meridian Deep Research Facility sent their final transmission this morning, Sothal reported, his whistle song subdued. Life support failed completely. All 5,000 researchers lost. Kethvar closed his eyes, feeling the weight of each death. The Meridians had been among the most vocal supporters of containing human expansion. Now their most advanced research station was a tomb because they had depended on human-designed environmental systems without realizing it. Any word from the refugee convoy heading to Corvin space? They should arrive within the week, sir. But the Corvin are reporting resource shortages. They're already supporting 2 million displaced beings from the Outer Rim evacuations. The refugee crisis was staggering. Entire populations were fleeing systems that could no longer support life without human infrastructure. The remaining council species were struggling to accommodate the displaced millions, but their own worlds were experiencing shortages as supply networks collapsed. "Sir," Sothal continued hesitantly, "there's something else. The Whispers have requested an emergency session with the full council. They claim to have information about human activities beyond the Rim. This was significant. The Whispers rarely communicated with other species directly, preferring to observe from a distance. For them to request a formal session meant they had discovered something extraordinary. The council chamber looked very different now. What had once been a symbol of galactic cooperation now resembled an emergency shelter. Several species have been forced to relocate their embassies as their home systems struggled with cascading infrastructure failures. The elegant environmental controls have been replaced with crude backup systems that left everyone uncomfortable. Only 10 species remained in active participation. The Meridians were gone, their civilization crippled by their dependence on human technology. The Spiral Dominion had withdrawn into isolation, focusing on maintaining their core worlds. 3 minor species had simply vanished, their representatives departing without explanation. When the Whispers delegate manifested in the chamber, a barely visible distortion in space-time that required sophisticated sensors to detect, the remaining representatives paid attention. The Whispers communicated through gravitational pulses that the chamber's translation matrix converted into text displays. Their message appeared in glowing letters above the assembly. Humans have not withdrawn. They have transformed. Observations from void reaches indicate massive construction project. Scale unprecedented. Purpose unknown. Prime Administrator Gell leaned forward, his cybernetic systems focusing intensely. What kind of construction? Ships? Stations? Colonies? Classification impossible. Structures exceed known engineering parameters. Energy signatures suggest technology beyond current galactic standards. High Counselor Thane's antennae drooped with what Corvin considered deep concern. Are you suggesting they've made significant technological advances in just 6 months? Negative. Evidence suggests construction began years before withdrawal. Project was prepared long in advance. The implications sent a chill through the chamber. Humanity hadn't just planned their withdrawal. They had been preparing for something much larger. While participating in council politics, while contributing to galactic civilization, they had been secretly building something in the void. Can you provide more specific information? Shekera asked, her energy form flickering with nervous energy. Structures span multiple light years. Gravitational effects detectable from extreme distance. Estimated population, unknown but significant. Estimated purpose, unknown but not defensive. Commander Tycho, representing what remained of the Council Defense Force, stepped forward. Not defensive? How can you be certain? Defensive installations would be positioned to protect known human territory. These structures face outward toward extragalactic space. The chamber fell silent as the representatives absorbed this information. If the humans weren't building defenses, and if their structures faced away from known space, then what were they preparing for? Kethvar found himself remembering something Ambassador Chan had said during humanity's final transmission. The galaxy is vast, and there's room for us somewhere beyond your borders. At the time, he had assumed she meant they would find empty space to colonize. But what if she had meant something else entirely? We need more information, he declared. Can the Whispers maintain surveillance? Surveillance discontinuée. Human detection systems have improved. Further observation risks exposure. Even the Whispers, masters of stealth and observation, had been detected and warned off. Humanity's technological development was accelerating beyond anything they had demonstrated during their council membership. Before anyone could respond, an urgent alert sounded throughout the chamber. Sothal's voice came through the communication system, tight with stress. Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Zephyrian philosophy worlds. They report contact with an unknown alien species. The aliens claim to be refugees fleeing something they call the human expansion. The chamber erupted in confused discussion. Human expansion? But humanity had withdrawn, not expanded. They had taken their people and left. Hadn't they? Patch the transmission through, Kethvar ordered. The holographic display activated, showing Philosopher Prime Zentak of the Zephyrian Collective. The ancient being's crystalline form pulsed with agitation patterns that suggested extreme distress. Honored Council, Zentak began, his harmonic voice carrying overtones of fear that Zephyrians rarely expressed. We have been contacted by a species calling themselves the Vakhi. They arrived in our space 3 days ago in damaged vessels, claiming refugee status. The Philosopher Prime gestured, and the display split to show security footage from a Zephyrian station. The aliens in the image were unlike any species in the galactic databases: tall, insectoid beings with metallic carapaces and multiple limbs adapted for fine manipulation. The Vakhi claim to be survivors of what they term a human conquest in the Andromeda approach, the region of space between our galaxy and the Andromeda Galaxy. According to their testimony, humans appeared in their space 18 months ago and began what they describe as systematic territorial acquisition. 18 months ago. That was 6 months before humanity's withdrawal from the Council. The Vakhi report that human forces demonstrated technological superiority beyond anything in their experience. Their resistance was ineffective. They were given a choice: evacuation or integration. Most chose evacuation. Zentak's form darkened with what Zephyrians considered profound unease. The disturbing aspect of their testimony is not the conquest itself, but its nature. The humans did not destroy Vakhi civilization or enslave their population. Instead, they offered what they called incorporation, full integration into human society with rights and privileges equal to human citizens. This was unexpected. Conquest usually meant domination, not integration. According to the refugees, thousands of Vakhi chose integration. They report that human society is different from what we experienced during their council membership. More advanced, more organized, and apparently more inclusive. The Vakhi who integrated were given positions in human society based on their abilities, not their species. Shekara's energy form flared with confusion. Are you suggesting the humans have built a multi-species civilization? That is what the Vakhi claim. Furthermore, they report that this human society includes species that we have never encountered, beings from beyond our galaxy who were contacted during human expansion into extragalactic space. The implications were staggering. While the Council had been debating the human problem, humanity had been establishing contact with civilizations beyond known space. They had been building something larger than anyone had imagined. There's more, Zentak continued. The Vakhi report that human expansion is continuing. They speak of human fleets moving toward multiple galaxies, of construction projects that dwarf anything in our experience, of technologies that seem to violate known physical laws. Commander Tykel stepped forward. Did the refugees provide any tactical information? Ship designs, weapon capabilities, defensive strategies? Zentak's harmonic patterns shifted to what Zephyrians considered grim humor. According to the Vakhi, human military doctrine has evolved beyond conventional concepts of warfare. They report that humans prefer what they call infrastructural persuasion, demonstrating such overwhelming logistical and technological superiority that resistance becomes pointless. They're not conquering through force, Kethvar realized. They're conquering through competence. The Vakhi describe a human force that arrived in their space and immediately began improving local infrastructure. They upgraded communication systems, optimized trade routes, enhanced medical facilities, and solved resource distribution problems that the Vakhi had struggled with for centuries. Within months, Vakhi society was functioning better than it ever had. The strategy was breathtaking in its effectiveness. Why fight an enemy when you could make them dependent on your help? Then, they offered integration. Join human civilization and keep all these improvements. Refuse and return to the previous state of affairs. Most chose integration. Gel's mechanical systems whirred with intense computation. This explains the construction projects the whispers observed. If humans are integrating entire civilizations, they would need massive infrastructure to support exponential population growth. But why? Elder Voss asked, her patterns dim with confusion. What is the purpose of such expansion? What are they building toward? The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the Vakai refugees, speaking through translation equipment that somehow bypassed the Council's failing systems. The humans speak of something they call the Great Work. The aliens said, its mechanical voice carrying strange harmonics. They claim to be preparing for what they term the challenge, some threat or opportunity that exists beyond current understanding. They seek to unite all sentient life in preparation for this event. What kind of threat? Tycho demanded. Unknown. The humans are secretive about specifics, but they demonstrate urgency. Their expansion is not random conquest. It is purposeful gathering. They collect species, technologies, perspectives. They seem to believe that diversity of thought and capability will be essential for what comes next. The chamber fell silent as the representatives struggled to process this information. Humanity hadn't just left the galaxy. They were building something vast and complex that spanned multiple galaxies. And they were doing it with a sense of urgency that suggested time was running out for something. We need to make contact, Kethvar declared suddenly. We need to understand what they're preparing for. Contact how? Shekera asked. Our long-range communication systems are crippled. Our ships can barely maintain interstellar travel without human navigation upgrades. Before Kethvar could respond, the chamber's emergency alert system activated. But instead of the usual warning tones, it played a simple musical sequence that several representatives recognized as distinctly human in origin. Incoming transmission, Sothal announced, his voice tight with surprise. Source unknown, but the signal is bypassing all our security protocols. It appears to be directed specifically at the council chamber. The holographic display activated, showing a figure that took several moments to identify. It was human, but changed. The woman appeared to be in her 30s, wearing a uniform that incorporated design elements from dozens of different species. Behind her, the bridge of her ship showed beings from multiple civilizations working together with an efficiency that seemed impossible. Greetings, Galactic Council, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested she had learned to speak in ways that multiple species could understand simultaneously. I am Admiral Elena Rodriguez-Chun, representing the Terran Alliance. Rodriguez-Chun. The name combinations suggested something unprecedented in human society. We are aware of the refugee situation and the concerns it has raised. We are also aware of the difficulties you have experienced since our withdrawal. We wish to offer assistance. Assistance? Elder Voss's patterns flared with suspicion. What kind of assistance? The human admiral smiled, and somehow the expression conveyed warmth across species barriers. The kind you need. Medical aid for your refugee populations. Technological support for your failing infrastructure. Trade agreements that can stabilize your economic situation. We do not wish to see unnecessary suffering. And in return, Commander Tycho asked grimly. Nothing immediate. But when the time comes, we hope you will remember that we offered help when you needed it most. The transmission ended, leaving the Council with more questions than answers. But for the first time in months, those questions included a possibility that none of them had dared to consider, that humanity might still be willing to help the galaxy that had tried to eliminate them. The question was whether the galaxy would be wise enough to accept that help when the true nature of the challenge became clear 2 years after humanity's withdrawal. The galaxy looked nothing like the orderly civilization that had existed before. Ambassador Kethvar stood in the newly constructed council chamber on Refuge Station, a massive habitat built from salvage materials and powered by aging fusion reactors. It was a far cry from the crystal spires of Centauri Prime, but it was all they could manage now. The refugee crisis had evolved into something approaching stability, though not the kind anyone had wanted. 300 million displaced beings had been relocated to emergency settlements throughout what remained of council space. The lucky ones had found homes on worlds where local infrastructure could support them. The rest lived in orbital habitats like Refuge Station, dependent on carefully rationed resources and hoping for better days. But it was the reports from the edges of known space that kept Kethvar awake during his sleep cycles. "The situation is complex," reported Captain Velan of the scout ship Wanderer's Hope. The Corvin officer had been leading reconnaissance missions to the boundary regions for months, trying to understand what was happening beyond Council space. Her reports had grown increasingly strange. Human activity extends throughout what we once considered empty space. We've identified construction projects in 47 systems that were supposedly uninhabitable. We've detected massive energy signatures from regions that our star charts show as void. Most troubling, we've encountered other species traveling toward human space. Refugees like the Vakhai? Kethvar asked. "No, sir. These are voluntary migrants. Entire populations moving toward human territory. Some are species we've never encountered before. Others, Captain Velan's antennae drooped with what her kind considered deep unease. Others appear to be our own people, citizens of Council worlds who have chosen to leave." The chamber fell silent. The exodus of Council citizens to human space was the galaxy's most carefully hidden secret. Over the past year, millions of beings had simply vanished from Council worlds, leaving behind only messages about seeking new opportunities or exploring different perspectives. "How many?" Prime Administrator Gell asked, though his computational systems already suggested the answer would be devastating. Conservative estimates suggest between 15 and 20 million beings have emigrated to human space in the past year alone. The actual number may be significantly higher, as we have no reliable method of tracking departures. Elder Voss's bioluminescent patterns flickered with what Meridians considered profound distress. 20 million, 1/10 of our remaining population. The demographics were even more troubling when analyzed in detail. The immigrants weren't random. They were predominantly young, educated, and skilled. The galaxy's best engineers, scientists, artists, and thinkers were leaving for human space at an accelerating rate. "We need to understand why," Shekera declared, her energy form pulsing with frustration. "What are the humans offering that we cannot provide?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Yithal, a Zephyrian philosopher who had recently returned for what he claimed was observation of human development, requested permission to address the council. His testimony proved both illuminating and disturbing. "The Terran Alliance has created something unprecedented in galactic history," Dr. Yithal began, his harmonic voice carrying overtones that suggested he was still processing what he had witnessed. "They have built a truly post-scarcity civilization." Post-scarcity. Thane's antennae twitched with skepticism. "That's theoretically impossible. Resources are always limited." "Not if you redefine what constitutes a resource," the philosopher replied. "The humans have developed technologies that make traditional resource limitations irrelevant. They can transmute matter at the atomic level, convert energy into any form needed, and manufacture complex materials from basic stellar matter. Their construction projects literally consume dead stars and turn them into habitat rings." The image was difficult to process. Entire stars being used as raw materials for construction projects. "But it's not just the technology," Yithal continued. "It's their social structure. The Terran Alliance operates on principles that integrate the best aspects of every member civilization. They've created governance systems that account for the decision-making processes of hundreds of different species. They've developed economic models that ensure every being can contribute according to their capabilities and receive according to their needs." "That sounds like idealistic nonsense," Elder Voss commented, her pattern sharp with disbelief. "I thought so as well, until I observed it functioning. The key is their approach to problem solving. Rather than forcing all species to conform to human methods, they've created systems that allow each species to contribute in ways that match their natural capabilities." Dr. Yithal gestured, and a holographic display showed images that defied easy understanding. Cities that incorporated architecture from dozens of species, with buildings that seemed to grow organically from the landscape. Massive orbital installations where beings of wildly different physiologies worked together on projects that spanned multiple star systems. The Corvin contribute their organizational abilities to manage complex logistics. The Whispers provide observational data that informs long-term planning. The Meridians offer their analytical capabilities for resource optimization. Species I had never encountered contribute abilities I didn't know existed. And what do humans contribute? Kethvar asked, though he suspected he already knew. Integration. They possess an unusual talent for synthesizing different approaches into unified solutions. They see connections that other species miss, and they have the social flexibility to work with almost anyone. The philosopher paused, and when he continued, his harmonic patterns carried something that might have been awe. But perhaps most importantly, they offer purpose. The great work that refugees spoke of is real, and it is magnificent. They are preparing for something called the Convergence, an event that will supposedly bring together multiple galaxies and require unprecedented cooperation between different forms of life. What kind of event? Commander Tycho demanded. I was not given complete information, but I observed massive astronomical projects. They are building structures that can detect and communicate across intergalactic distances. They are developing technologies that can survive in the void between galaxies. They speak of contact with intelligences that operate on scales we can barely comprehend. The implications were staggering. While the Council struggled to maintain basic civilization, humanity was preparing for contact with intelligences beyond their galaxy. How long have they been planning this? Shekera asked. According to the timelines I observed, the project began before humanity joined the Galactic Council. Their entire participation in our politics was apparently a cover for gathering information and resources needed for the great work. The betrayal was almost too large to process. For 32 years, humanity had been studying galactic civilization not as partners, but as researchers gathering data for their own purposes. They used us, Gell said, his mechanical voice carrying a note of what might have been respect. They learned everything they could about our capabilities, our technologies, our weaknesses, and our potential contributions to their project. Yes, Dr. Yithal agreed, but not maliciously. From what I observed, they genuinely valued our contributions. They simply recognized that the Galactic Council as it existed was inadequate for the challenges they foresaw. Before anyone could respond, the Chamber's alert system activated. But instead of the usual emergency tones, it played a complex musical sequence that seemed to incorporate elements from the traditional music of every species present. Priority transmission incoming, announced the station's AI, using a voice that somehow sounded familiar to everyone despite being completely artificial. Source identified as Terran Alliance Diplomatic Corps. The holographic display activated, showing not a single human, but a group of beings representing multiple species. At the center stood a figure that took several moments to identify. It appeared to be Ambassador Sarah Chun, but changed in ways that suggested years of modification and enhancement. "Greetings, Galactic Council," she said, and her voice carried harmonics that made it pleasant to every species simultaneously. "I hope this message finds you well, despite the challenges you have faced." Behind her, the other figures included beings that the Council had never seen before, species with exotic physiologies that suggested origins in environments completely unlike anything in known space. "I am speaking to you now as Ambassador Chinyaktai Whisper Song," she continued, and the name combination suggested integration deeper than anyone had imagined. "I represent the Terran Alliance in matters relating to this galaxy. We are aware that our departure caused significant disruption to galactic civilization. This was not our intention, though it was perhaps inevitable. We had hoped that our contributions have been integrated deeply enough into your systems to survive our absence." Elder Voss's patterns flared with indignation, but Chun continued before anyone could interrupt. We are also aware that many of your citizens have chosen to join the Alliance. We want you to know that these immigrants are not refugees fleeing your civilization. They're pioneers seeking to be part of something larger than any single species or political structure. The image shifted to show vast construction projects that dwarfed anything in Council experience. Habitat rings that could support billions of beings. Ships the size of small moons. Structures that seemed to bend space itself into new configurations. The great work continues to expand, and we have reached the point where we can offer formal invitation to participate, not as subjects or junior members, but as equal partners in preparing for the convergence. What is the convergence? Kethvar called out, not sure if the transmission was interactive. To his surprise, Ambassador Chinyakta Whisper Song turned toward his voice as if she could see him directly. The convergence is contact with intelligences that exist on scales beyond current understanding. Think of civilizations that span multiple galaxies, beings that manipulate matter and energy on cosmic scales, entities that have transcended physical limitations entirely. The convergence will bring these intelligences into contact with younger civilizations like our own. The chamber erupted in shocked discussion, but Chen's image continued speaking. According to our calculations, the convergence will begin within the next 50 to 100 standard years. When it does, civilizations that are not prepared will be absorbed or displaced. We do not wish this fate for any sentient species. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Prepare for the convergence or cease to exist as independent civilizations. The Terran Alliance offers membership to all species willing to contribute to the great work. You would retain your cultural identity and govern your internal affairs as you see fit. But you would also have access to technologies and resources that can ensure survival during the convergence. Shakira's energy form flared with suspicion. And if we refuse, Chen's expression showed something that might have been regret. Then you face the convergence alone, with whatever resources you can develop independently. We will not abandon you entirely. Humanitarian aid will always be available, but we cannot protect civilizations that choose isolation. The transmission continued for another hour, providing details about Alliance membership, the technologies available to member species, and the scope of the great work. When it ended, the Council was left with a choice that would define the future of their civilizations. Join humanity's grand project and become junior partners in something beyond their understanding, or maintain independence and face an uncertain future alone. The debate began immediately and would continue for months. But as Kethvar listened to his colleagues argue about sovereignty and dignity and cultural preservation, he found himself thinking about the 20 million beings who had already made their choice. They had chosen the future, even if it meant abandoning the past. The question now was whether their governments would be wise enough to follow their example before it was too late 5 years after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council. Ambassador Kethvar found himself standing in a place that shouldn't have existed. The observation deck of Alliance Station Harmony offered a view that challenged every assumption he had held about the nature of space, time, and civilization. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, he could see the convergence web, a vast network of structures that stretched across multiple star systems, connecting dozens of worlds through what the humans called dimensional tunnels. Ships the size of continents moved through space with impossible grace, carrying populations between worlds as if they were crossing streets. But it was the view beyond the web that truly defied comprehension. In the distance, visible through enhancement fields that somehow made intergalactic space transparent, other galaxies hung like jewels against the cosmic dark. And between them, barely visible even with Alliance technology, moved things that hurt to think about. Entities so vast that entire star systems were merely components of their physical structure. The convergence has begun earlier than projected, explained Dr. Elena Rodriguez-Cathal, the human administrator who had become his guide to Alliance society. Her name now incorporated elements from 5 different species, and her appearance had been modified to facilitate communication with a dozen different physiologies. Our calculations were based on incomplete data. The actual timeline was accelerated by factors we didn't anticipate. Kethvar struggled to process what he was seeing. The Galactic Council's final vote had taken place just 3 months ago, a narrow decision to accept Alliance membership rather than face the unknown alone. He had expected a gradual integration process, perhaps decades of careful negotiation and cultural adjustment. Instead, he found himself witnessing the transformation of reality itself. "How long has this been happening?" he asked, gesturing toward the cosmic construction projects visible in the distance. "Active convergence protocols began 18 months ago," Dr. Rodriguez explained, her voice carrying harmonics that somehow made complex concepts easier to understand. But preliminary contacts started much earlier. Humanity's expansion into extragalactic space was actually a response to initial convergence signals we detected nearly a century ago. A century? Humanity had been preparing for this contact since before they had achieved faster-than-light travel, working toward goals they couldn't have fully understood at the time. "The entities you see in the distance are what we call the shepherds," she continued. "They guide younger civilizations through the convergence process. Think of them as gardeners working on a cosmic scale." One of the distant shapes shifted, and Kethvar realized he was looking at something that contained entire solar systems within its structure. The concept of intelligence operating on such a scale was almost impossible to accept. "They're alive?" he whispered, in ways that expand the definition of life beyond current understanding. "They exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions we're only beginning to perceive. The convergence is their method of bringing younger species into awareness of a larger cosmic community." A chime sounded through the observation deck, and Dr. Rodriguez gestured toward a transport pad that had materialized nearby. "The council delegation is ready for the integration ceremony. We should join them." The transport system was unlike anything in Kethvar's experience. Rather than the crude matter transportation he was familiar with, Alliance technology seemed to fold space around them, carrying them across vast distances instantly while maintaining perfect continuity of existence. They materialized in a chamber that defied geometric possibility. The space seemed to extend infinitely in all directions, yet felt intimate and welcoming. Beings from hundreds of species moved through the area, their movements coordinated by some invisible organizing principle that ensured no one was ever crowded or isolated. The ceremony itself was unlike any political event Kethvar had ever witnessed. Rather than speeches or formal protocols, it consisted of something that could only be described as shared experience. Each species contributed their unique perspective on existence, consciousness, and cooperation, creating a collective understanding that transcended language or cultural barriers. Kethvar found himself experiencing memories and emotions from beings whose physiology was completely unlike his own. He felt the deep satisfaction of the Corvin hive mind working in perfect coordination. He experienced the fluid grace of meridian thought processes. He touched the vast, patient awareness of species he had never encountered, beings whose lifespans were measured in geological epochs. But underlying all of it was something distinctly human, a restless curiosity, an irrepressible drive to explore and understand, a willingness to take risks that other species considered insane. It was this human element that had somehow catalyzed the entire process. Humanity's unique combination of adaptability, ambition, and social flexibility had made them ideal intermediaries between the established galactic species and the cosmic intelligences that guided the convergence. As the ceremony concluded, Kethvar found himself in conversation with beings he recognized from the Old Council, though they too had been changed by their integration into Alliance society. High Counselor Thane still retained his essential Corvin characteristics, but his consciousness now extended through quantum networks that allowed him to coordinate activities across multiple star systems simultaneously. Elder Voss had undergone even more dramatic changes. Her aquatic physiology enhanced to survive in environments that spanned dimensional boundaries. Her bioluminescent patterns now communicated in spectra that included dimensions beyond normal space-time. "Do you regret the choice?" Kethvar asked her during a quiet moment between integration activities. Her patterns shifted to configurations he didn't recognize, new forms of expression that incorporated concepts from dozens of species. "Regret implies that I mourn something lost. But what we lost was limitation, isolation, the constant struggle against entropy and ignorance. What we gained is participation in something magnificent." She gestured toward displays that showed the scope of Alliance activities. Entire galaxies were being connected through the convergence web. Civilizations that had never imagined life beyond their home systems were suddenly part of a community that spanned cosmic distances. The humans showed us that the universe is not a hostile emptiness to be endured, but a vast community to be explored. They taught us that intelligence and cooperation can overcome any challenge, even those we cannot yet imagine. Over the following days, Kethvar participated in orientation programs that introduced him to Alliance society. The scale was staggering: billions of worlds, thousands of species, technologies that manipulated matter, and energy on levels that approached magic. But it was the social structures that impressed him most. The Alliance had somehow created governance systems that functioned across cosmic distances while respecting the autonomy of individual species. Decision-making processes incorporated the consensus-building methods of hive minds, the analytical approaches of artificial intelligences, and the intuitive leaps of organic consciousness. Conflicts were resolved through systems that found common ground between beings whose basic assumptions about reality were completely different. At the center of it all were humans, not as rulers or dominators, but as facilitators and translators. Their gift for seeing connections between disparate elements made them natural coordinators for civilizations that might otherwise never have been able to communicate. "We're not the most intelligent species in the Alliance," explained Admiral Harrison during one of Kethvar's briefings. The human military leader had been enhanced with technologies that allowed him to perceive and interact with beings whose existence spanned multiple dimensions. "We're not the most advanced, or the most ancient, or the most powerful, but we have something that makes us valuable. We're curious about everything, and we're willing to try anything." It was this willingness to experiment, to risk failure, to attempt the impossible, that had made humanity the catalyst for the greatest transformation in galactic history. As Kethvar prepared to return to what remained of Council space, to help coordinate the integration of his own people, he found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. Humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council had seemed like abandonment at the time. Now he understood it had been preparation. The humans hadn't left because they were angry or offended. They had left because they had work to do, work that required freedom from the limitations and prejudices of established galactic politics. They had been preparing for the convergence, building the infrastructure and alliances that would allow younger civilizations to survive the transition to cosmic citizenship. The final irony was that the species who had feared human expansion and sought to contain their influence had been saved by the very qualities they had found threatening. Humanity's relentless growth, their technological innovation, their social adaptability, their willingness to challenge established boundaries. All of this had been necessary for preparing the galaxy for contact with intelligences that operated on truly cosmic scales. Standing once again on the observation deck of Harmony Station, watching the convergence web extend its reach toward distant galaxies, Kethvar finally understood what humanity had been trying to tell them from the beginning. The universe was vast beyond imagination, full of wonders and challenges and opportunities that no single species could address alone. Cooperation and mutual respect weren't just idealistic goals. They were practical necessities for survival in a cosmos where intelligence took forms that defied easy categorization. Humanity had seen this truth earlier than others. and they had acted on it with characteristic boldness. They had reached out to unknown species in distant galaxies, built alliances with intelligences that existed in dimensions beyond normal space, and created technologies that made such cooperation possible. Now, as the convergence transformed the very nature of existence for billions of beings across multiple galaxies, the wisdom of their approach became clear. The humans had left in silence not because they were abandoning their allies, but because they were building something large enough to save everyone. In the distance, new galaxies were coming into view through the dimensional tunnels, each one bringing fresh perspectives and capabilities to the growing alliance. The great work continued, expanding beyond anything its original creators had imagined, driven by the simple human belief that intelligence and goodwill could overcome any obstacle. As Kethvar prepared to help his people take their place in this vast community, he whispered a prayer of gratitude to whatever cosmic forces had brought humanity to the stars just in time to guide the rest of them home. The galaxy they had known was gone, transformed beyond recognition. But the universe they had gained was infinite in its possibilities, and humanity had made sure no one would face its challenges alone. In the end, that was perhaps the most human gift of all, the absolute refusal to accept that anyone should have to struggle in isolation when cooperation could make everyone stronger. The silence that had followed humanity's departure had been broken by something far more valuable than words: the chance for every species in the cosmos to find their place in a community vast enough to contain all their dreams.